are you?
I'm really good. I'm really good. More importantly, how are you? Can you give us an update on your, not even a new normal, you are just back to normal. How's
Um,
that? What's going on in the Isle of Man?
yeah, well, as of today, technically as of today, they basically scrapped to some extent, like basically scrapped social distancing. So it's no longer a legal requirement to social distance. I think only in like the healthcare sector. So obviously if you're going into the hospital or, into an appointment, you have to sort of social distance there, but generally in public, out and about, it's all pretty chilled. You can do what you want. I've just been out for lunch to a nice little restaurant. And yeah, it's been really nice, pretty chilled. So yeah, pretty good news over here, really. It kind of feels strange that other people are not in this sort of same situation. When I speak to other people in the UK and they're like, with their face masks on, or they're like, oh, having to pick and choose who they see, and I'm just like, I feel selfish talking about it. But
yeah. Just like me to the pub.
yeah,
It's not.
had pints. The one thing that hasn't reopened yet properly is like bars and nightclubs.
Right.
Obviously that's probably the next step. There's a government announcement as we speak, so I mean, I don't know whether that'll be something that gets announced soon, but we'll see. But right now you're allowed to go into like pubs to have food, so you can't just go to the pub for a pint, just for a pint. You've got to go and get a substantial meal.
Oh,
by a substantial meal, you're getting a plate of chips and it's fine.
It's a bit like when you're like underage drinking, to have a pint, you have to have a carvery. It's sort of like that.
Yeah, but I mean, it's still pretty chilled. I've had a fair few when I've been out for food and stuff. I've had, a couple of pints. It's all pretty good, pretty chilled. So
you find yourself almost, because you've had to, socially distance for quite a while now. Do you find yourself like going back into that? So you're sort of like doing a social distance where you don't need to. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean, it's been a weird one because even for weeks now, it's been sort of, the attitude has been from the government here is you do what you want with people you're comfortable with. So for a while now, it's sort of been that if you don't want a social distance with your friends or your family, you don't really have to. It's more out in public and in shops and in public places that you have to respect it. But obviously, when I've seen people, it's if somebody's come around to my house, it's like you don't know what their view on it is. So it's like you have to kind of ask somebody permission to be like, is it alright if I give you a hug? Like, can we hug? Like,
yeah.
Right with that? Like, is that okay?
Sort of ruins the moment.
Yeah, it's like it's fine with me, but is it alright with you? And you're sort of there doing this awkward, like, encounter. But yeah, no, it's strange. It's definitely strange. But I mean, it's going slightly back to normal. I just hope it's
you are the envy of the world at the moment.
Yeah.
you in New Zealand.
Yeah,
so lucky.
I know, but I don't think many people really know about the Isle of Man, let alone know about what's happening here. So it's.
We could probably do a story on that alone, because I haven't seen anyone. I saw New Zealand, lots of headlines about how that's going back to proper normality now, but Isle of Man, I wonder about the other islands, like the Isle of Wight. Is that?
Yeah, and like Jersey and Guernsey as well. Yeah. But at the moment, it's the Isle of Man's the first British island to scrap social distancing, so we're doing pretty well here.
But, and we're getting excited about a couple of shops opening.
I know. Well, you know what? It's small steps back to normality, and hopefully things are hopefully looking up in the UK as well. Fingers crossed, but we will see. We will see.
What story have you got this week?
So we are looking at the environment. So Britain passed a huge environmental landmark last week, as midnight on Wednesday night marked 2 full months of Great Britain using no coal to generate power on the national grid, which is the longest period of time that the nation has gone without coal since the Industrial Revolution. So it's pretty big news. Just to point out, Great Britain, I mean, as you probably know, but Great Britain refers to England, Scotland and Wales, as Northern Ireland isn't on the national grid.
Yeah.
So the National Grid have claimed that they've been running their electricity network since the 9th of April completely coal-free. So prior to this, the previous record in recent times was 18 days, 6 hours and 10 minutes, which was set in June 2019. So it's pretty substantial.
Smash the record.
Yeah, really good, really good. And I've not really seen an awful lot about this in the news, to be perfectly honest. So it's, you know, it's a big story, and it's, you know, it's positive news as well. You know, we've been needing a little bit of positive news in our lives, I think, all of us. So yeah, so we'll sort of have a little look at how our energy consumption sort of changed. I think we've got a little graphic that we could have a little look at.
We do indeed.
Yeah. So essentially, about a decade ago, around 40% of Britain's electricity came from coal. But over the years, the use of renewable power sources such as solar and wind power has skyrocketed due to the sort of cheaper costs and the environmental benefits, meaning that over, like, you know, year on year, the use of fossil fuels has been reduced. And, you know, the lockdown situation in Britain has meant that, you know, demand for electricity has plummeted anyway. You know, huge sectors have essentially been shut down, and transport networks have been avoided. You know, people haven't really been using public transport, and there's, you know, office buildings and shops and all sorts of buildings that would usually consume a huge amount of electricity have essentially been, you know, not being used. So this has sort of meant that the national grid have been able to take some power plants completely off the network, and of these plants taken off the network, the four remaining coal-fired power plants were among the first of these to be shut down. So yeah, it's pretty big news.
Will I get this graphic up?
Yeah, let's have a little look and see what it says.
We can get this. So this is showing you, and the results are quite dramatic actually. So yeah, this is showing you the daily share of Britain's power generated by burning coal. The really black bits are 50%.
Yeah.
So, you know, pretty high that. And then your greens are 0%.
Yeah.
And it can show you, I mean, even from 2012, the difference to now is drastic. I mean, we look at how much green and how little, well, there's no black at all on there. So, you know, green, far less percentage in terms of how much coal we're burning. So yeah, it really sets out significant progress.
Yeah, definitely. It's you know, it's big news really. And I think as well, not just the lockdown situation, you know, has contributed massively to, you know, this taking place, but also the weather conditions of the last sort of couple of months. We've seen the hottest May since records began in Britain. So really warm weather has meant that people haven't had their heating on and haven't been lighting the fire. You know, there's been very little need for coal power, you know, for any sort of electricity anyway, for like central heating and all of that stuff. So, you know, it's, you know, there's a few contributing factors, but, you know, it's really good news. So 10 years ago, only 3% of Britain's electricity came from wind and solar power. But now the UK has the world's biggest offshore wind industry and the world's largest single wind farm off the coast of Yorkshire, which was completed last year. And according to the BBC, a single rotation of one of these giant wind turbines can power the average home for an entire day.
That's amazing.
Yeah, because I knew that, I mean, I obviously knew that, so, you know, wind power was really good, but there was always, you know, big debates about wind power. I remember because there's wind farms on the route that I have to come through on the ferry, there's wind farms. And I remember it was always a big controversy when these farms were being built, because people complain about them being eyesores and, you know, they didn't look nice and all of that. And you know, people were saying it's not worth it. And there was this big debate, you know, before this big environmental sort of campaigns happened over recent years. But, you know, that's huge. One rotation can power a home, the average home, for a day. So, you know, they're pretty good things to have. So the nation's biggest power plant, located in Yorkshire, it's called Drax, has been switching to compressed wood pellets imported from the USA as opposed to using coal. And they plan to phase out coal entirely by 2021.
Okay.
So a Mr. called Will Gardner, the chief executive of the Drax Power Group, has claimed that as a result of this, the company has reduced its CO2 emissions from over 20 million tonnes per year to almost zero. But this claim has been met with a little bit of controversy, as some environmentalists have said that wood actually produces more carbon dioxide per unit generated than coal does, and that it takes many years for the trees to absorb this CO2 produced by the power plant annually. However, Drax have said that because the trees do take up carbon dioxide as they grow, and new forests are planted when these trees are harvested to produce these wood pellets, so the company's net emissions have been reduced drastically by using renewable source of energy as opposed to burning the coal and the fossil fuels. Similarly, the environmental journal Carbon Brief claims that so far, renewable energy has generated more power than fossil fuels put together this year. So renewables were responsible for 37% of the electricity supplied to the national grid versus 35% for fossil fuels. Nuclear power accounted for 18% of power, and the remaining 10% came from imports such as these wood pellets. So Dr. Simon Evans of Carbon Brief stated that so far this year, renewables have generated more electricity than fossil fuels, and that's never happened before. So with gas also in decline, there is a real chance that renewables could completely overtake fossil fuels in 2020 as a whole. And this trend of sort of the increased use of renewable energy can be seen in other countries as well. It's not just in Britain, as in the US, for example, renewable energy has also overtaken coal for the first time in 130 years. But unfortunately, this isn't the story everywhere. Some nations, such as China and other developing nations, their governments actually actively support the coal industry. So, even though it's good news in some places, it's not necessarily in others. However, Great Britain do aim to close all coal power plants by 2024, so only a few years' time, as part of their efforts to reach the government's net zero emissions goal by 2050. And Justin Rowler of the BBC said on this, said that when this happens, the fuel that sparked the Industrial Revolution here in Britain almost 2 centuries ago will be a thing of the past. So hopefully if this sort of trend continues, then we won't really be burning coal as a fossil fuel anymore. And
which is a massive achievement. I mean, as that quote reveals, we used to be so reliant on it. It was like the way, and if they can achieve that 2024 target, it'll be a massive achievement and part of a clear movement at the moment that is going to more renewables. And I think it's interesting in the lockdown period, like in other areas of the environment, it's created that pause. And I think actually maybe woke people up a bit more. We can create significant changes if we take dramatic action. So it's positive news, and I think we need positive
news definitely. And as well, it sort of shows that I think there was this sort of debate years ago that I sort of remember as a young, as a child, when you used to learn about these sort of things in school. And, and a lot of sort of schools of thought would say, these forms of, solar power and wind power they don't produce as much energy as, fossil fuels are the easy option, as they do it a lot quicker. But in reality, it's showing that it's a lot more beneficial, and it does work. We can clearly live without fossil fuels, and at some point we're going to have to learn to live without them, because they're not they're not renewable, and we will run out of them eventually. So it's great that Britain especially is sort of learning to work without them. So
when you talk about how a single the massive wind turbines and a single sort of revolution can power an entire home for a day. It is effective. It clearly, if correctly, is really effective.
Yeah, it's great. And it's especially solar power. The British Isles are windy. There's a lot of wind power to be. I mean, I suppose solar power not so much. But as we said, May's been the sunniest May since records began, and so that's been huge for that source of energy. But even wind power is so easily accessible in the British Isles. It's just, you know, the issue of building them, and, you know, some people complain about what they look like, but, you know, I'd rather look out the window and see a wind turbine than look out the window and see a huge power station, personally. But, you know, some, you know, people are different, but, you know, it's really good news, and I kind of hope that it continues on this positive sort of turn. So yeah,
definitely. I've been looking at some of the reaction to this story, and a lot of people have been, you know, so grateful for a piece of news that's actually positive. When we're you know, inundated with such negative news at the moment, and it all seems quite down and depressing. But this is definitely a piece of positive news. And Asad Razuk, CEO at, now I need to pronounce his company right, Syndicatum, I think is how you pronounce it.
Okay, but, I'll go with your pronunciation. Yeah. I have no idea how I pronounce it.
I mean, that's the best I think I've got on that one. That's a sustainable resource company, and he's the CEO of this company. And he's actually been pointing to other, you know, great news, great climate news in the week. So he talks about Britain being coal-free as one of them, but also the US solar market sees its best quarter ever. So good economic news there. And batteries now power cars for 2 million kilometers. So that basically means, I had to look at what that means, because that seems like a weird measurement. I was like, yeah. But that basically, in short, means that there are batteries now that can power electric cars for a far longer amount of time. It can do a far bit greater distance.
Without you having to sort of recharge it.
Exactly. Yeah. Greater capacity. Germany unveiling a 9 billion green hydrogen strategy. Another piece of good news that he points to. Indian Railways building 3 gigawatts of solar. And France pumping 1.5 billion into carbon neutral planes. So I think it shows you a global picture there.
Yeah.
But as you pointed out, it really does require a global effort, because if countries like China, who have a bit of, you know, a tricky record on the environment, into issues, it requires a global effort. Otherwise, because we all share a planet, don't we? If one country's not doing it and the other country's doing, you know, lots, then it kind of undermines it a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So a global picture is needed. But you were talking about above with the wood pellets, and environmentalists saying we still release quite a lot of CO2 from burning wood. And I've been looking at this, and it's an interesting one. You talked about renewable energies or renewable forms of energy. And usually, you know, wind, solar, they're the ones that we think of. But burning wood is also seen as a renewable form, or renewable forms of energy. And there's been criticism of this. So actually, the burning wood releases quite a lot of CO2. There's a tweet from Chris in Yorkshire that I saw that said, "No, coal is great, amazing. Whilst wood pellets are better than coal, they are not emission free in the production and shipping from America and in burning them."
Because I suppose you are still burning something. It's, you know, you might not be burning a fossil fuel, which does emit potentially more CO2, or, you know, and it's also non-renewable, but you're still burning something. So I'm sure you know, I'm not no scientist, but from, like, you know, an educated guess would tell me that, you're still contributing towards some sort of negative emissions. But
and there's been research in the UK on this, and they found that burning wood, and I quote, is a disaster, say UK-based researchers, because older trees release large amounts of carbon when they're burned, and they're not always replaced. So, and also in terms of replacing these trees, it can take up to 100 years to cultivate a wooden area that soaks up as much carbon as was previously released. So it's not a case of like, you can, you know, burn these trees and then replant and it goes back to how it was. They're saying it takes a really long time.
Because I suppose as well, you know, with wind and solar power and hydropower, all these different, you know, the ones that sort of you would think of when you think of renewable energy are sort of easily accessible. You know, you can put up a wind farm, and as long as the wind's below it and you're getting power, and as long as the sun is shining, then you're getting power, you know. But with trees, you can't just plant a tree and get the resources from it straight away. You know, it takes a significant period of time. You know, it can take decades for trees to grow. So, you know, it's not as renewable as the other sources of renewable energy, I suppose, as well. So that's an issue in itself.
Yeah, exactly. And a quote from William Schlesinger. Again, another. Why do we always choose
I know.
hardest names to pronounce?
I know.
Anyway, he's a biochemist and a member of the US Environmental Protection Agency. And I quote, he says that when you cut down existing trees and burn them, you immediately put carbon dioxide in the air. None of the companies can guarantee that they can regrow untouched forests to capture the same amount of carbon released. And you had a quote above from the quote above, and I'm trying to get it now, from Drax.
Okay.
Or, Will Gardner, who's basically saying that we will burn these trees, but we can also regrow them and replant them pretty quick. Well, William Schlesinger is saying that is not the case. And he says the whole renewable forest industry is a kind of hoax in terms of its benefit as climate mitigation, which is strong words. And I got a really good stat here from Professor John Bennington, the former UK government chief scientific advisor. He calculates that carbon emissions will rise by 6% or possibly more if wood is allowed to continue to provide more and more of Europe's energy output, rather than a reduction of at least 6% that will come from using other renewable sources such as solar or wind power.
Wow.
So there's evidence here that's saying actually burning wood isn't a great answer. It's not the answer, and the forms of renewable energy.
Wow, that is a big statement, actually. You know, I think people assume that it's all renewable forms of energy are great and good, but realistically, maybe burning wood isn't the best. I think burning anything is the best thing to do.
Yeah.
I think it's probably best that we stick with the, you know, ones that we've been discussing, you know, solar power and wind power and hydropower as well. I think is one that doesn't get talked about an awful lot, but it's a good one to have as well. But but still
it's a bit
good
of a
news
on the story, I think, because you see the stats like, great, Britain is coal free for 2 months. A high amount of percentage of now renewable forms of energy instead of fossil fuels. But as you're saying, when you look into what is actually classed or how we produce renewable forms of energy, it's not always perfect, and there's still a lot of progress.
Definitely.
Make sure we
but
get.
I would assume that in general, though, it's still better than, you know, well, it is still better than it was, you know, decades ago. Even a decade ago, it was 40% of our fuel came from our electricity came from fossil fuels. So I mean, it's still progress, whether or not it's amazing progress. It's still progress. So and
I think we're learning quicker and quicker, and I don't think it's bad intent to be burning wood. I just think it's maybe an area that needs to be researched more, needs to be more evidence on it, more of a debate on it. But no doubt, as you're saying, progress is made, and it is good news. It is good.
Yeah, and as we said earlier as well, I think, you know, this sort of lockdown period and this whole situation has put the world to a sort of standstill, and in a way it's given the world, sort of the earth, sort of chance to repair itself a little bit. And you know, fewer people using public transport, fewer people using energy in general, so I suppose the world itself has sort of stopped a little bit and, you know, sort of replenished itself. And also it's given people time to reflect and sort of realize that we don't need this many fossil fuels, and hopefully that it can only get up from here. And, you know, hopefully global warming will simmer a little bit, but I mean, I don't think it's ever going to be gone. But
I wonder is, I've seen lots of people using disposable barbecues. I'd love to know what the effect of those are in the environment.
Yeah, I don't know.
That would have definitely shot up, I think, in recent weeks. So I wonder what.
Yeah, and also I've noticed, well, for me in this whole coronavirus situation, when I've been going for like takeaway food, you know, the amount of plastic that gets used now. You know, obviously we were on, people are trying to avoid plastic like there's no tomorrow. And then now that things are becoming, have been in takeaway boxes and takeaway cups and plastic cups, all these things that people were really trying to avoid, of now they've sort of had no real choice because they've got to use things that are disposable. And we've had a couple of takeaways since lockdown began at home, and the amount of plastic boxes, takeaway boxes that we've had, and Tupperware style boxes. My mum even said, she was like, do they want these back? Like, I can go give them back. And I was like, I don't think they're going to want them back.
Same thing now you say it.
Yeah.
We've got
we've got an entire cupboard dedicated to the little boxes that you get from the Chinese takeaway. So, I suppose that's sort of temporary. I think people are still definitely big on the plastic issue, and I think that people know that long term we need to reduce our use of plastic. But obviously, it's a period of time where people are going to have to make the best of a bad situation. So, I'm hoping that the intent is to sort of go back to these, more environmentally friendly ways. But for the time being, it's sort of been put on a hold a little bit. But
yes, it had. You have got a quiz for me on. I thought originally, is it a quiz on coal? Because that would really be niche.
Like, is it coal or is it something else? Like pictures of coal. Yeah. But, we actually have a coal bucket outside. I don't know many people who buy coal these days, but we live in an old terrace house, so we actually use coal for our fire. Not that we've had our fire on for years, but we're one of the few that are still burning coal, unfortunately. Yeah. But yeah, so my quiz is sort of, I've done 4 questions, but a couple of them have got like bonus points, so there's more than 4 points up for grabs. Yeah. So I'm just gonna make a note of how many points you get because my memory is not great. Okay, so the questions are sort of to do with stuff that we talked about, so sort of power and energy and the environment, stuff like that. So question number 1 is, when was the first known electricity producing wind turbine built? And you get a bonus point if you can tell me what country it was in. So I'll give you 3 options, multiple choice for the date, the year, but you have to just guess the location. I'm not going to give you that many clues.
It's not going to be China. I think it's fair.
No. So the first electricity producing wind turbine, was it built in A, 1887, B, 1893, or C, 1900?
It's a lot earlier than I thought, actually. I'm going to go C, 1900.
No, unfortunately not. It was 1887.
That's quite early.
Apparently. And do you happen to hazard a guess at where it was located?
Part of me wants to think a Scandinavian country because they all seem quite on it with the environment, like a Norway or a Sweden. But then I'm thinking Germany potentially.
Okay.
But then it's the time, isn't it? And I am going to go for Sweden.
Well, unfortunately, that was wrong. It was actually Scotland.
Oh, Scotland, was it?
Apparently. So the first known wind turbine used to produce electricity was built in Scotland. It was created by Professor James Blythe of Anderson's College, Glasgow, now known as Strathclyde University. And his 10-metre high cloth-sailed wind turbine was installed in the garden of Holiday Cottage and was used to charge accumulators developed. But so essentially it was just in his back garden, and it was 10 metres high, but it's down as being the first known wind turbine. So it wasn't wind turbines to the extent that we're thinking, but it was
not
still
on a huge scale, but
not like a national grid scale.
Still impressive for the time.
Still, very impressive.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is one that I'm not going to give you an option for this because it's one of those ones that if I gave you options, I think it would probably give it away too much. But essentially, over which 2 centuries did the Industrial Revolution take place? So it fell over 2 sort of centuries.
Okay. Let me think about this. From the 18th to 19th century? No.
Well done.
Well done.
18th and 19th century.
18th to 19th century. Good. Okay, nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
1760 to roughly 1840. Some say 1820 to 1846, so it depends on that one. Hence why I didn't ask you the actual dates, because they're sort of up in the air. Okay, so next question. How many points have you got so far? 1. I keep saying I'm going to note it down and then I don't. Okay, so what are the 3 main types of fossil fuels? Bonus point if you can name the 4th one that's sometimes considered a fossil fuel, but in all honesty, I didn't know of this. So basically, if you can name the 3 main fossil fuels, then you get a point. And if you can name the 4th one, then you get another point. If that makes sense.
No multiple choice on this one.
No, because there's only 3. It's just
3 fossil fuels.
One of which we've discussed, so you definitely know one.
Sorry, I'm panicking. Gas?
Gas is one, yeah. But what have we been talking about? Coal.
Sorry, I always panic on these. And I just don't really want to say something really stupid. Do you know what I mean? Oil. No. Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. Okay, so petroleum.
I looked it up.
Petroleum, coal, and natural gas. And do you happen to know what the 4th is? Probably not, because I don't.
No.
No, it's called. It says.
Peat. Oh no, you already said petrol, haven't you?
Peat is also sometimes considered a fossil fuel. Peat, also known as turf, is an accumulation of partially decayed vegetation or organic matter. I mean, if somebody knows anything about the environment and can correct me on any of this, like, I apologize if this is wrong, but this is what Google told me. I've never heard of this before, but
I can't believe I got 3 out of 3 on that. I thought I was.
I just couldn't believe that you were like, what one have we discussed? I was thinking we have literally.
I really didn't want to say something completely ridiculous. I was just trying to get my thoughts together. But yeah, proud moment that.
Yeah. Okay. So the last question has also got, so there's a lot of bonus points in this round, in this quiz. So what year was the famous environmental activist Greta Thunberg? I always never know how to say her name. Thunberg. Greta. What year was she born? And bonus point if you can tell me where she was born, so which city she was born in. So was she born in 2001, 2002, or 2003?
Ooh. 2003 would make 17. 2003.
Correct.
Nice.
And do you happen to know what city?
What city
she was born in? Or even what country?
What country she was born in? Yeah, I'm just thinking of Scandinavian countries, but it's going to be, I think, Sweden.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, and the country and the city was Stockholm.
Yes.
Oh, mate.
Well done. This is the best you've ever done. I don't think
I'll ever do better than this.
4 whole points.
Mad.
Fred, I've got some news that I've just had on my text messages, and apparently, I'm sorry to break this to you, but for me, it's pretty good news that pubs and clubs are reopening on the Isle of Man on Thursday.
Unbelievable. On Thursday?
Thursday.
My
like,
Lord.
Look, my phone is popping off, like, big time.
Oh my Lord. I can't believe you're going to be in a nightclub on Thursday.
Yeah, so pubs and clubs have reopened. No limit on how many people you can have in your house.
So basically, your coronavirus is over.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to contain my smile because I don't want to be rubbing it in people's faces too much, but pretty good news.
I might just come and live on the Isle of Man.
That's not possible right now. I'm sorry, the borders are closed, but if you want to sneak in, I won't tell anyone.
That is going to be good luck with that though. On Thursday, the queues are going to be out the door, aren't they?
Yeah, I think it's going to be pretty busy, but hey ho, pretty exciting news.
Us will be running.
Mm, good question. I don't know. I have to get on the case, see what they're saying.
Can you tell everyone what the party bus is? Because for your birthday, you booked it, and it was.
Yeah, so the party bus is this sort of Manx legend on the Isle of Man, where it's essentially a double-decker bus, but it's kitted out with like disco lights, and the seats are all sort of open seated, so you can sort of all walk around, stand around on it. And essentially, you just go on a huge pub crawl from pub to pub on this bus, and you just bring your own drink on the bus. There's a DJ. You're going around all the country roads on this bus. It's lethal. It's a health and safety nightmare, but it is so much fun.
It was good fun.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's just crazy. And Fred came to stay with me last year in September for my birthday, for my 21st, and he experienced the party bus. And you were very much in your element, Fred. You really enjoyed it, didn't you?
I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
I literally didn't want it to end.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's a good laugh. Everybody ends up with a fair few injuries afterwards. I don't think you ever come off the bus without bruises, but
you're shaking left to right.
It's crazy, isn't it? It's madness, but it's amazing. Yeah, good fun. Well, hopefully Party Bus is in action soon, and I'll be getting on that.
It has to be back. You can't open the clubs and not have the Party Bus.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very jealous.
Yeah.
Let me know how the clubbing goes.
I think I'm probably going to get a fair few unfollows on social media, because you know when you just get drunk and you're like posting all your stories everywhere, and people from elsewhere who don't live on the Isle of Man will probably just think I hate you with a burning passion and just block me.
Block you out.
Yeah, I think if we come back next week, I'll let you know how many followers I've lost on. I'll make note of how many I've got today and how many I've got next week, and then we'll see.
I can't believe that. I think we probably won't be in nightclubs until at least December, January. I mean, wow.
I'm sorry. I'm not sorry.
Brilliant. Well, enjoy. Yeah, we're just gonna be inside reading books. So enjoy your enjoy your nightclub experience.
Well, I shall try. Yeah, but you know, hopefully it improves in the UK soon, so you can be on the same happiness wavelength as me.
Yeah, I'm not holding my breath on that one. But yes, we'll be back next week.
We will.
Look forward to it.